uh, how quickly these guys get back into being able to worship the way they're not supposed to, which is, of course, through these idols, through these Baalim and Asherot. Very disappointing, and again, something that kind of begs the question: why was it so hard to uproot the um, the idolatry? Why was it so difficult for um, for Israel to give up their idolatry? How ingrained was it in their consciousness that they didn't want to or they couldn't? They keep going back to it. All right, so let us continue with the text, and I think I've got it up now for everybody. Yeah, the last thing we read is Manasseh, his son, succeeded Hezekiah, right? This really, really good king. Here we go.
Manasseh was 12 years old when he became king, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. He did what was displeasing to God, following the abhorrent practices of the nations that God had dispossessed before the Israelites.
So you see, the guy, not a good guy. We know right, we know right away. It kind of ruined the story in the sense that they tell us right off the bat, this guy's not a good guy. Um, so yeah, it kind of begs the question that we have asked a few times. There doesn't seem to be necessarily a connection between being a good king and living a long time, and on the other side, being a bad king and living a long time, because it seems like you don't really get rewarded with a long life or a long reign if you do the right stuff. So this is definitely upsetting from the standpoint of where's the, where's the goodness here? Where's the reward? Where's the, how do we make sense of why, why a good king, you know, why a good king doesn't live that long, and why does a bad king seem to be able to come back and come back and just bring everything back, and then 55 years. I mean, that's a long time. So I'm sure that's a so yeah, this is about, by the way, 650 or so BCE is when Manasseh is the king. So this is the Assyrians, remember, came against Israel about 700 during Hezekiah's time, and now he survived that. He survived the siege, and now he's after he passes Manasseh. This is about 680. He passes 690. He passes, and Manasseh takes over and reigns to about 640. So here we go.
He rebuilt the shrines that his father Hezekiah had demolished. He erected altars for the Baals and made sacred posts. He bowed down to all the host of heaven and worshiped them, and he built altars to them in the house of God, of which God had said, "My name will be in Jerusalem forever." He built altars for all the host of heaven in the two courts of the house of God. He consigned his sons to the fire in the valley of Ben Hinnom, and he practiced soothsaying, divination, and sorcery, and consulted ghosts and familiar spirits. He did much that was displeasing to God in order to provoke anger. He placed a sculptured image that he made in the house of God, of which God had said to David and to his son Solomon, "In this house and in Jerusalem, which I chose out of all the tribes of Israel, I will establish my name forever. And I will never again remove the feet of Israel from the land that I assigned to their ancestors, if only they observe faithfully all that I have commanded them. all the teaching and the laws and the rules given by Moses.
Well, there seems to be a little bit of knowledge here that this is not going to end well, in the sense that, again, it follows logically based on the fact that we believe that this is written by somebody who knows what's going to happen, that they know that this is going to be um, that the exile is going to happen, that they will be removed from the land that I assign them, right? So this is, of course, to some extent, an explanation for what happens. Um, but you see what I was saying, that like he's dead, and now they're not just altars to Baal, out in the country. It's in the temple. It's in the temple. That's what it says. In the house of God. So it seems to me, and I'm not alone in this thought, that in Jerusalem and in the tribe of Judah and within the royal family and in the priesthood or whatever was going on religiously, whatever you want to call it, there must have been there must have been a rival religious authority that was functioning as a system within the community that maybe goes underground during the time of Hezekiah, but as soon as Hezekiah is dead and Manasseh's in charge, because Manasseh's an adult when he takes over, they're ready to go. You can't have you can't have this, I think, any other way. Just not logical that these people weren't just lying in the background ready to go as soon as Hezekiah was done. It just seems too fast and it seems too organized. So it seems as though that
Are
this,
their mothers Jews? Or are they princesses from
yeah,
other places?
that's a good question. We didn't actually get who who uh who Manasseh's mother is. Didn't say. Sometimes it does. That's a good point, right? In
Right,
this
that would really affect how the child was raised.
exactly. So you'd say, well, he's a product of he's an interfaith marriage, right? But here's the weird thing. Like that it's natural to kind of say there's something with the mom, which was the situation with Queen Natalia. So it does happen in that but remember, her mother's is Isabel. I mean, the lady who brings Phoenician Canaanite idolatry to King Ahab in the north. So we know that it is possible, but it's not even mentioned here. And in some cases, it doesn't seem like the mother of the problem king is not Israelite, right? She is Israelite. Put it in the positive or whatever. Yes, in the not yes, keeping it positive, though it's not positive. Um, Positive grammatically. No, this doesn't seem to be that case, though, Gail. This seems to be there's an organization at work here. This isn't mom got this guy to start worshiping other gods. There's a rival priesthood that's working in Jerusalem, ready to go with Baal at a moment's notice. This is a system. This isn't a guy going, hey, I think I like to do what my grandfather did, or we're going back to the Baal stuff. It's there, and we're going to put it back because my dad decided to go, real old school back to David and Solomon.
Well,
But that's
archaeology supports this idea, right? We're
correct,
finding all
correct. We,
kinds of
we,
things.
we
We
find
were
we
not
find these
monotheistic.
yeah, we find these statues everywhere. So
Yeah.
yeah, it seems as though it's more of the maybe Hezekiah is the aberration. Hezekiah is not the norm. And that's one of the things that when I was saying before about religious Jews not wanting to study this, it seems as though, again, from the archaeology and from the text itself, that idolatry was rampant. And again, I'd be careful to say how much of this human sacrifice was going on, but heck, the sacrifice is going on. This is 650 BCE. This is only, 150, 200 years before Ezra. There's Jews that are, some of them, the king, somebody is still practicing human sacrifice. Yeah. So you tell me who had a problem with human sacrifice. It seems like we do. I mean, I don't know. The text just told us that. I mean, I'm not telling you that. The text just said it. Again, to show you to you, he consigned his sons to the fire in Ben Hinnom. He did the other stuff too, the sorcery and the witchcraft and the Ouija boards and all that stuff. But I want to focus on that. He's practicing human sacrifice. So, yeah, at least until 600s, there's still human sacrifice going on in our community. I will I will tell you, again, we keep saying that this is what the Canaanites were doing. This is not me. This is my professor. This is Richard Elliott Friedman, who is very pro-Jewish, by the way. It's not like he's actually worked hard his whole career to try to make sure people understand the Jewish roots of this and not downplay it. But he actually pointed out we don't have a lot of archaeological evidence that Canaanites were practicing human sacrifice. In all fairness, we don't have a lot of proof that Jews were practicing human sacrifice too. But the text says it. The text says that we were doing it. The Bible says it. So, yeah, our obsession with human sacrifice, or not, I'd say obsession, but our Akedah story, our binding of Isaac story. I want you to understand something, what I'm about to tell you. If the book of Genesis is not written until the 8th or 7th century, okay? Well, forget if you take the historical tack that it was written by Moses in the 12th or 13th century BCE, okay, fine. We know there's human sacrifice still going on because it's going on. It's, I mean, we know it's going on. But if that part of the Bible in Genesis is written, let's say in 800 or 700, which is what most biblical scholars would say, it's no later than that. That means the Akedah story is written. We sometimes think, oh, well, Moses wrote it or it was written by people who had stamped out human sacrifice. No, no. The Akedah story, at the latest that it was written 200 years before the text tells us in Chronicles that human sacrifice, child sacrifice, is still going on. So if you think the Akedah story was written as a kind of a quaint, nostalgic story about how Abraham stopped human sacrifice amongst the Jews, that's not true. That's not true. If anything, it's a polemic and it's a cautionary tale about why we need to stop doing it. And again, we don't know how often it's done. I don't want to say every Jewish family was sacrificing their children, but some of them were. And if the most powerful people are doing it, you wonder if it filters down. So I want to make it clear, however you look at this, as a biblical historian who's looking at dating and authorship and scientifically, or if you're looking at it as a religious scholar who's orthodox and observant, I don't care. No matter what, the Bible just told us that in 650, Manasseh was sacrificing his sons. Okay? So it's the whole thing is troubling. That's to me really troubling. And again, that's not my opinion. That's what you just read. Is everybody clear about that? Because I said, either way you look at it, any way you look at it, not only is it horrible, but the text tells us that it's happening in 650. All right.
Can I just ask about, go back to the rival
Yeah.
priesthood
Yeah.
for a second? Are we envisioning that there were like two different sets of priests in the temple at the same time, like say the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is now? Or are we saying that the priesthood was okay with what
No,
Manasseh was doing, or that they got driven out and the rival priests took over?
I think they're constantly battling each other, these priests. I think
Mhm.
my suspicion is that these priests who are ready to go with Baal at a moment's notice, some of them were killed, some of them were driven out, but some of them are close enough to come back that as soon as they're ready to go, they don't have to teach people how to do this stuff. They're ready to go. And
Mhm.
it's not like it's clear that Manasseh is not inventing this. I mean, it's just common sense that tells you, well, if he keeps going back to it, if they keep going back to it, it's not, it's there. It's low, it's got to be low level. And I think that the aberration at this point are the good kings who try to fight against it. So what I'm saying is that the cultural energy was not to do what Hezekiah was doing. And again, as Gail said, that's what the archaeology tells us too. With the amount of Asherah statues that we found, the female fertility statues we found, yeah, they're at least having those. Again, we can't say that, everyone was worshiping Baal in the backyard, but this is pretty clear that it's ready to go and people just keep going back to it. Again, partly because everyone around them is doing it. It's the norm, it's what everyone's doing. I mean, I don't want to.
Doesn't this sort of carry on to even later on with the Persian? You know that the idea that amulets and that they're evil
Yeah, I mean,
demons.
yeah, you're right. There's always a desire to do it. I was going to say that it's more of like, how do you keep out, a cultural influence that is just is so strong. I mean, it's almost like, I mean, it's a stupid comparison, but it would be like, it'd be like, this is a really stupid comparison, but you'll get it. It'd be like if every synagogue, I mean, I'm not saying, and this is not the exact, not saying that, folk music and modern music is Satan, but if a synagogue is trying to keep traditional melodies that were non had no musical no instrument no instrumentation, no accompaniment, and everyone's like, yeah, but everyone likes that kind of music, everyone's doing that kind of music, we got to do that kind of music. And you got somebody going, no, we're going to listen to the traditional cantorial soloist, and people are like, yeah, but nobody wants to hear that. So again, this is not the same level, this is child sacrifice, but you get the idea, which is like everyone wants to hear this music. Why are you making us listen to music that no one wants to listen to just because it's traditional? And my guess is that there were people who looked at that, maybe not with, hopefully, with the child sacrifice stuff, but definitely when it came to Baal and putting up statues. They were like, dude, everybody has statues. Why are you telling us we can't have statues? You people are ridiculous. You're being ridiculous. Everyone has statues. Let's get a really nice statue. So I think that that's, you know, I, to us today, we don't like statues because our priests, the priests who want the David and Solomon type thing, or they won, you know. But again, I don't say it's the same thing, but it's maybe a similar mentality, which is like, look, everybody wants to have this new stuff and or the stuff that everyone else is doing, and we like it. It makes us feel good.
It's not just that. I think abstract ideas aren't easy for people to absorb, right? Something visual or physical that they can actually see
Yeah,
or
even more
carry
so.
around with them.
Even
Yeah.
yeah, even more so. Yeah, even more so with the with this issue of idolatry. But I do think there's just like, why are you making it hard on us? Just let us. And I have a feeling that
Rabbit's feet. People used to carry it on a rabbit's foot. Do you know?
absolutely, but I have a feeling that these people who are worshiping with the balls and with the statues and stuff like that, I think they I think they felt that it gave them comfort, like the rabbit's foot. I mean, I think it made sense to them and they felt comfortable with it. And for whatever reason, I don't think it made them feel like it must have made them feel safe and secure. That's why people would have done this in a religious for a religious reason. But it's clear that it's the popular sentiment. That it's actually the way that people want to do things. They want this. All right, let's keep
Rabbi,
going. Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
having a hard time wrapping my head around sacrificing my kids.
yeah.
So,
You should.
the benefit right here is being able to cross-check as we're studying,
Yeah.
to get deeper even with ChatGPT. I'm still having a hard time, you know, what do you think the agenda? Well, first, do you think it was actual sacrifice, or do you think it was do you think it was more just rituals? That's question number two, where it never really happened.
Step back, step back. Where did that come from? That it was just a ritual?
I just asked about Midrash and how
Yeah,
the
yeah.
rabbis were treating it.
Yes. So the rabbis treated it in different ways. Some of the traditional rabbinic texts were, no, this is human sacrifice. This is they burned them up, and that's what they did. The Midrash plays with the language a little bit by saying that they just walk through fire, that they didn't actually burn them, they didn't kill them. Um, the only problem with that is that the Hebrew and the context that we have, and we know what they're describing is a ritual, and it's mentioned flat out in the Book of Kings that the king of Edom, I mean the king of Moab, burned his son in front of the Edomites and the Israelites. We know that it did happen. There's no reason I mean, the reason to make it not human sacrifice is to make these people not as bad as they are. I don't think the
Don't the
text,
Orthodox still have a ceremony where you buy back the oldest son?
yeah, the Pidyon Haben. The ritual of Pidyon Haben is based on, to some extent, not doing human sacrifice. But back to what John's saying. Yes, there was a hope that this really didn't happen, but it did. The interesting thing is while the Canaanites didn't practice child sacrifice this way very much, or we don't have much evidence of it archaeological. I'm only going to tell you what we know. I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to tell you when it's my opinion and when it's not my opinion. The archaeological evidence is we don't have a lot of archaeological evidence for human sacrifice, period. The Bible is the text that talks about it. And so again, the rabbis feel uncomfortable with that, so that's why they, in some cases, midrashically smooth it over, if you will. We do know from archaeological evidence that in in Carthage, which was Canaanite, it was Phoenician outpost, right, in North Africa and modern day Tunisia. There we have found actual cultic ritual human sacrifice sites by Canaanite peoples. It's difficult, again, I don't want to make larger conclusions from that, but it could be just we haven't found the Canaanite sites within the land of Canaan. We found them outside of Canaan, and again, we have to be careful, but I do think that there's I take those sites to be indicative that the Canaanites practiced human sacrifice. The Bible tells us they practice human sacrifice, and that the reason why we're doing it is we're behaving like them. But I do think that when the only thing I could say, John, is that the writers of the Bible say that it happened and it didn't happen. And I don't think that's the case, in the sense that they said it happened because they want to make Manasseh look really bad. But I don't think that's the case. I do think he did it, and I think that he did it and he did it because he thought he should do it. Again, the logic behind it was that if you sacrifice your child to the gods, you will be rewarded with many more healthy children because you've proven that you love God so much that you're willing to sacrifice your child to God. And when 80% of children are dying at birth, I'll do anything I can to try to keep my child alive, including sacrificing a live one. So
What think about what a crazy time. What a crazy time to be alive.
crazy. It's crazy. But this is what happens when people are swimming in ignorance. We can look back at it and laugh at them or cry at them and be
Right.
mad at them, but when you don't know what's
When you're
happening,
scared. I mean, look at people that get cancer. I mean, I still remember, what was it, apricot pits. People will go down to Mexico to get Laetrile. You know,
Yeah.
when you're scared or you're frightened, you'll just do
yep,
anything.
yeah. And I think people, the more frightened they were, the more they would turn to horrible things like this.
Yeah.
And uh,
Did
it's
the
kind of a
Egyptians
system where people would say, hey, why
sacrifice
did
children?
what?
Did the Egyptians sacrifice children? I don't remember that. Just
We don't
Carthage.
we don't have texts where they talk about sacrificing children. As I said, we know they practiced human sacrifice on a major level because when their pharaohs died, they would kill people and put them in they
Oh,
would
yeah. Yeah.
sacrifice the people. So I want to make it clear. I'm talking about child sacrifice here rather than human sacrifice, because human sacrifice we know was practiced all over. But this ritual of child sacrifice seems to be something that was really a big problem in the Bible. So, uh, yeah, you can see the agenda here is to make sure that we know that after a few good kings, it doesn't matter. The overall push was these people do not deserve to live in the land of Israel, the land that I assigned to their ancestors. All right. Yep.
Manasseh led Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem astray into evil greater than that done by the nations that God had destroyed before the Israelites.
Yeah, that's the Canaanites. That's the statement that we're worse. We're doing worse.
God spoke to Manasseh and his people, but they would not pay heed. So God brought against them the officers of the army of the king of Assyria, who took Manasseh captive in manacles, bound him in fetters, and led him off to Babylon. In his distress, he entreated the eternal his God and humbled himself greatly before the God of his ancestors. He prayed to God, who granted his prayer, heard his plea, and returned him to Jerusalem, to his kingdom. Then Manasseh knew that the eternal alone was God. Afterward, he built the altar wall of the city of David west of Gihon in the Wadi on the way to the fish gate, and it encircled Ophel. He raised it very high. He also placed army officers in all the fortified towns of Judah. He removed the foreign gods and the image from the house of God, as well as all the altars that he had built on the mount of the house of God and in Jerusalem, and dumped them outside the city. He rebuilt the altar of God and offered on it sacrifices of well being and thanksgiving, and commanded the people of Judah to worship the eternal God of Israel. To be sure, the people continued sacrificing at the shrines, but only to the eternal, their God.
So that's an interesting one where Manasseh turns out, he repents. There's actually an apocryphal book called The Prayer of Manasseh, which is based on this amazing scene of a guy who recants and turns back. Um, and so you can see this happens during his lifetime. Um, so, well, that's kind of a good story, right? But it also shows us how prevalent it was and how easy it was to some extent to go back and forth. Um, and of course, it also tells us that there's this other issue. It's not just about worshiping other gods, it's not worshiping in Jerusalem. And so Manasseh is really good about getting rid of the other deities. He's not really good at getting rid of the other altars. So the priests who write this, right, and edit it, they're reminding you he was good, but he wasn't perfect because he didn't get everybody going back to all going to Jerusalem, right? So that's pretty good. I mean, it's a story about a guy who repents. So again, in the minds of some people, there's a reason to, maybe we need to know what that prayer was. And so there is a text called the Prayer of Manasseh, but it's not in the Bible.
The other events of Manasseh's reign and his prayer to his God and the words of the seers who spoke to him in the name of the eternal God of Israel are found in the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. His prayer and how it was granted to him, the whole account of his sin and trespass, and the places in which he built shrines and installed sacred posts and images before he humbled himself, are recorded in the words of Hosea. Manasseh rested with his ancestors and was buried on his palace grounds. His son Amon succeeded him as king.
Yeah, well, we don't have those books, and we don't have the words of Hosea. We do have probably some of this, the other things that this author is talking about. I mean, we have some of it in the book of Kings, but we don't have this stuff. And so again, we have a later version of the prophet, I mean of this text, the letter of Manasseh, but it was not written during this time. And so um it was, it was people wanted it, so somebody did it. Um so again, this guy reigns for a decent amount of time, but he's known as a guy who repented. His son, however,
Amon was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned 2 years in Jerusalem. He did what was displeasing to God, as his father Manasseh had done. Amon sacrificed to all the idols that his father Manasseh had made and worshipped them. He did not humble himself before God as his father Manasseh had humbled himself. Instead, Amon incurred much guilt.
yeah, yeah. So the Bible doesn't forget to tell us here, yeah, his dad, used to do that kind of stuff. So yeah, maybe he just didn't, he definitely doesn't repent, right? It tells us he doesn't repent, but you know, the problems are there. And you also can see right off the bat 2 years. He's 22 and he takes over. So that's not good. We'll see why.
His courtiers conspired against him and killed him in his palace. But the people of the land struck down all who had conspired against King Amon, and the people of the land made his son Josiah king in his stead.
So there was a coup. There was a coup against Amon. Now, Amon was 24 when he got killed. We don't know what happened. The Book of Kings doesn't give us a whole lot more information about this. It really gives us no more information about it, but we know that this coup doesn't succeed in the sense that whatever he did, the people who killed him were killed. So Josiah's made king. Now, now he's 22 when he's king. He's king lives for 2 more years, which means he's how old when he dies? 22. This is not a hard math question. He's 22 and he reigns for 2 years.
24, right.
Yeah, he's 24. So that means you don't know anything about Josiah yet, right? Well, you do if you read Kings and you remember Kings. What do we know about Josiah then, right off the bat? Just using a little math. When he becomes king, he's a baby. His dad was 24 when he died. So even if his dad had him when he was really, really young, he's a kid, a little kid. That's Kid King Josiah. Yep. Let's read about this really good but very young king. He's one of the last kings we're going to read about. Here we go. Oh, sorry.
Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. He did what was pleasing to God, following the ways of his forefather David without deviating to the right or to the left. In the 8th year of his reign, while he was still young, he began to seek the God of his forefather David, and in the 12th year he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of the shrines, the sacred posts, the idols, and the molten images.
All right, so let's just pause there for a second. Um, Whenever you see that he did what was pleasing to God and didn't deviate from the right or left, it's another way of saying he's a good king. He does the right thing. He's worshiping the right way. He's um, he's a good guy. Um, but he's ridiculously young. Now, the book of Kings gives us a bigger version of this story, which basically tells us that he was raised by the priests. And so it makes sense that he doesn't deviate from the right or left because he's literally being raised by the priests. So um, let's keep in mind that this book is written and edited by priests. So when you have a king who takes over at 8 years old and is being raised and directed by the priests, they literally have everything that they need in this king, right? They have they have almost one of their own. I mean, he's a descendant of David, right? So he's from the tribe of Judah, and everything's legit from the standpoint of the qualifications exist for him to be a king, but he is essentially a priest. He's a complete. He's under the control of the priests. I'm not saying that's a bad thing because we're the descendants, as Jews, we're the descendants of these guys in the sense that these are the people who we follow. People like the priests and the people from the tribe of Judah who follow these priests. But this is one of our own. And you know, right off the bat, that he reigns 31 years. But if he's only 8 years old when he takes over, this good guy, this really wonderful king who does exactly what the priests want, maybe at a level that no other king ever does, doesn't live to see his 40th birthday. Not good. Not fair. So he goes about demolishing the altars, the shrines. Here's what happens.
At his bidding, they demolished the altars of the Baals, and he had the incense stands above them cut down. He smashed the sacred posts, the idols, and the images, ground them into dust, and strewed it onto the graves of those who had sacrificed to them. He burned the bones of priests on their altars and purged Judah and Jerusalem. In the towns of Manasseh and Ephraim and Shimon, as far as Naphtali, lying in ruins on every side, he demolished the altars and the sacred posts and smashed the idols and ground them into dust, and he hewed down all the incense stands throughout the land of Israel. Then he returned to Jerusalem.
So let's pause right there. This is a purge. If you're going to purge Israel of its idolatry, You don't just destroy the altars, you grind them down. You literally make them, there's no piece of them that you can see again. And you kill the priests who are doing it. So back to what you were talking about, Rosemary, I think this line right here is a really important line, if not the most important line for these last chapters. These were priests that were doing this. This wasn't just people getting up and saying, let's worship Baal. These are priests, Jewish priests, priests in Judah that are doing this. And he kills them and burns their bones. You get it? This is not just idolatry. This is a system of idolatry that is instructed. There's ritual. There is a system in place for this stuff to happen. And Josiah, with the priest's encouragement, the priest of Jerusalem encouragement, the Jewish priests, the God priests, the ones who don't want this stuff, he goes crazy. So this, we call this the Josianic Reformation. Josiah is literally an agent of destruction on behalf of the priests of Jerusalem, the Kohanim. Yeah. Because he's not just religious, he's not just on their side. He's like one of them. And he does exactly what they want, which is get rid of this stuff, root it out. And it's literally at its root. All right.
In the 18th year of his reign, after purging the land and the house, he commissioned Shaphan, son of Azaliah, Maaseiah, the governor of the city, and Joah, son of Joahaz, the recorder, to repair the house of the Eternal his God. They came to the high priest Hilkiah and delivered to him the silver brought to the house of God, which the Levites, the guards of the threshold, had collected from Manasseh and Ephraim, and from all the remnant of Israel, and from all Judah and Benjamin, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. They delivered it into the custody of the overseers who were in charge at the house of God, and the overseers who worked in the house of God spent it on examining and repairing the house. They paid it out to the artisans and the masons to buy quarried stone and wood for the couplings, and for making roof beams for the buildings that the kings of Judah had allowed to fall into ruin. Those involved did the work honestly. Over them were appointed the Levites Yahat and Obadiah, son of the sons of Merari, and Zechariah and Meshullam of the sons of Kohath, to supervise, while other Levites, all the master musicians, were over the porters, supervising all who worked at each and every task. Some of the Levites were scribes and officials and gatekeepers.
Again, a lot of this stuff is what Hezekiah did too, his great grandfather. So his great grandfather, Hezekiah, who lives about 70 years before him, he does the same stuff. He has priests, he has Levites, he has people doing the right stuff, he has them rebuilding stuff. I mean, the other kings didn't do this stuff. Maybe Hezekiah did it, but most of the other kings hadn't done this. Taking care of he's doing their work. He's doing what they wanted. This is literally a dream come true to the priests. You can't ask for more. But there's something he's going to do that these other guys didn't do.
As they took out the silver that had been brought to the house of God, the priest Hilkiah found a scroll of God's teaching given by Moses. Hilkiah spoke up and said to the scribe Shaphan, I have found a scroll of the teaching in the house of God. And Hilkiah gave the scroll to Shaphan. Shaphan brought the scroll to the king and also reported to the king, all that was entrusted to your servants is being done. They have melted down the silver that was found in the house of God and delivered it to those who were in charge, to the overseers.
Yeah, so while they're doing all this work, which is really important work, they find a scroll. Now, this is one of the most important incidents in the Bible because we believe that it's an incident that, and again, this isn't just traditional scholars, this is biblical scholars who believe this 100% happened, though maybe in a slightly different way. When this scroll is found, this creates an opportunity for teachings of Moses to actually be promulgated and well, this text was either found or was written at this moment. A lot of people believe that it was written at this moment. But even if it was found, which is the traditional understanding, that yeah, the rabbinic understanding was they found the book of Deuteronomy. But whatever happens, either this book is either found or written, the book of Deuteronomy is going to essentially put into play certain things that seem to be, if they're not game changers, they're a point in time where we can say we know what was on the mind of the Jewish people at this point, including several times in the book of Deuteronomy where it says you're only allowed to worship in one place. Before the book of Deuteronomy, we don't have that in the Bible. That means Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus is all about priests. Nowhere does it say you can only worship in one place. Now, Deuteronomy doesn't say the name of that one place. It just keeps saying in the place that, in the city or in the place that God tells you to go. And so that's understood to be Jerusalem. Later on will be Jerusalem. But the idea that there's only one place to worship, that's only in the book of Deuteronomy, which makes sense if it's written by priests who work in Jerusalem. Now, that's the simple answer of what the book of Deuteronomy is, because obviously there's a lot more. Deuteronomy is, in some cases, you could make the argument it's the most important book of the Bible, at least from the standpoint of mitzvot, because almost every mitzvah that we have of the 613 commandments comes from the book of Deuteronomy. The Torah portion, Ki Tetzei alone, has over 70 commandments, mitzvot. So almost every mitzvah that we have comes from the book of Deuteronomy, which means, again, it has a very, very important focus on ritual and on ethical and religious functions for Jewish people. And it is, at least from that standpoint, the most important book of the Bible from the standpoint of what are we supposed to do as Jews? There's no question Deuteronomy is the most important. Is it the most, does it have the most history in it? No. There's very little history. The only history in it is Moses retelling the journey that the people took to get to the spot that they're at, which is about to cross over into the promised land. But this moment of finding that book allows for these reformations to have the final stamp, the seal, and literally saying, everything that we've been telling you as priests, we didn't make it up. God told us this. So this is a really important moment in Jewish history. However you want to call it, the moment that Deuteronomy is found, the moment that Deuteronomy is written, whatever you want to call it, in this moment, Jewish law to some extent comes into being, and we still turn to the book of Deuteronomy on a daily basis because the Shema Ve'ahavta comes from there. The word Shema Yisrael comes from this book, and so much more. But the ideas and the theology, and to some extent the rituals or the ritual foundations of Judaism start in the book of Deuteronomy. So look what happens. They find it as they're repairing, if you will. They find it, like It's like a time capsule. We found it.
The scribe Shaphan also told the king, "The priest Hilkiah has given me a scroll." And Shaphan read from it to the king. When the king heard the words of the teaching, he tore his clothes. The king gave orders to Hilkiah and Ahikam, son of Shaphan, and Avdon, son of Micah, and the scribe Shaphan and Isaiah, the king's minister, saying, "Go, inquire of God on my behalf and on behalf of those who remain in Israel and Judah concerning the words of the scroll that has been found. For great indeed must be God's wrath that has been poured down upon us, because our ancestors did not obey the word of God and do all that is written in this scroll." Hilkiah and those whom the king had ordered went to the prophetess Huldah, wife of Shallum, son of Tokat, son of Hazra, keeper of the wardrobe, who was living in Jerusalem in the Mishneh, and spoke to her accordingly. She responded to them, "Thus said the eternal God of Israel, say to the one who sent you to me, thus said God, I am going to bring disaster upon this place and its inhabitants. All the curses that are written in the scroll that was read to the king of Judah, because they forsook me and made offerings to other gods in order to vex me with all the works of their hands. My wrath shall be poured out against this place and not be quenched. But say this to the king of Judah, who sent you to inquire of God. Thus said the eternal God of Israel, as for the words that you have heard, since your heart was softened and you humbled yourself before God when you heard my words concerning this place and its inhabitants, and you humbled yourself before me and tore your clothes and wept before me. For my part, I for my part have listened, declares God. Assuredly, I will gather you to your ancestors, and you will be laid in your grave in peace. Your eyes shall see nothing of the disaster that I will bring upon this place and its inhabitants." They reported this back to the king.
So we let you, Rosemary, I didn't want to interrupt you as you read the amazing prophecy explanation, if you will, from the prophet Huldah, the prophetess. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Where do we start? Well, the first is Josiah realizes that the book of Deuteronomy basically says if you break the rules, you're going to be exiled. And they're like, we've been breaking the rules. Well, you can also make the argument, you know, they have now been articulated clearly, but I guess the good news, Josiah, and this is also in the book of Kings, this is exactly as it's reported in the book of Kings, word for word. This part, you're okay. You're not going to see any of this happen yourself. You're not going to, it's not going to happen in your lifetime. Now, it's still, I mean, let's be frank, it's a pretty scary thing to be told. You know, if somebody tells you, well, the world's going to end, but it's not going to end for another 100 years, you know, and we're actually told that frequently, right? With regard to climate change and things like that, that, you know, if we keep on this course, human life is not going to be able to inhabit this planet, whatever. Come on. People hear this all the time and we go about our lives. I mean, again, I know there's people who are telling us it's not true, but common sense tells us that there's definitely damage being done to our planet. And at some point, this planet could kick us out. Or make it impossible for us to live easily like we're living right now. I don't know. I have different feelings about this. Sometimes I think, yeah, the earth will take care of itself. That's one of the messages we get from some of our movies and some of our cultural icons will tell us the earth will take care of itself, both good and bad, right? Either it'll sort itself out or it's going to punish us and destroy us. It's kind of the modern day prophets, whether they're Al Gore or whoever that you want to use as your Cassandra, if you will. But I will tell you that if I was Josiah, I wouldn't I wouldn't go, "Phew, I avoided this. We can all go back to normal now." You know, but look, when we understand that this is either a, as it is in the Book of Kings, a warning, like we're on the track for destruction, or written in Chronicles where it's already happened. So I don't need to do anything else other than report it and to tell you that Josiah did his best to try to do the right thing. But yeah, there's a lot happening here where, if I'm not going to say if, this is one of the most crucial moments in Jewish history that's being reported. And I do believe it happened. I, I, I believe it was found by people who wrote it, but I do believe that this scene does happen. And I do believe that these people were well intentioned from the standpoint of trying to get people on the right course. Um, there's another just question of, well, the Assyrian Empire almost destroyed us, and the Babylonians are going to conquer the Assyrians and build off their infrastructure and finish the job, if you will. But there's definitely an ex there's a theological explanation for it right here, which is you've just done you've done so much wrong. It's time for you to go. You're going to have to go through this. This is definitely the book of Jeremiah that we read. It's too late. You can't stop it. It's going to happen. So buckle up and take it. Um, but let's also consider something that we should do before we turn the page. Prophetess Huldah? A prophet? It's a woman. What's going on here? So, yeah, seems to be the case that women are prophets. It's not like it's not like they said, and there was no other woman prophet ever except for Huldah. So we have to assume that there were other women prophets. We know Deborah was a prophet, but that was 400 years ago. You know, I think it's safe to say that it wasn't that rare. Not just because it doesn't call attention to it, but it also seems to be, in the sense that, again, there was no, and there was one woman prophet, or there hasn't been any women prophets except for Huldah. I'm not saying that the text had to say that, but it said so matter of factly. And look, the king, like, she's the authority. It's not like there's another prophet that they go to. They go to her. And this is the king. So she's the authority there. I mean, of course there were other prophets, but she's the one that they go to. So I think it's pretty significant to consider that at least this woman, Huldah, was very well respected as a prophet and didn't seem to, like I said, on the face of it, doesn't seem to need to be introduced as, oh, and isn't it remarkable or isn't it unique? We had this woman prophet.
Hey, hey, Mark. Whoops.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, is she mentioned anywhere else in the Tanakh? I don't remember.
No, she's not. I mean, she's mentioned in the Book of Kings. This whole story is a repetition of it.
But it mentions I don't it mentions actually Huldah in the Book of Kings.
Yeah, it mentions
Okay.
this whole scene is this whole scene is lifted from Kings. So look, we have a place in Jerusalem called Huldah's Gate, right? Um, and you know, we don't, and Huldah was, um, um, I mean, it was a legitimate Hebrew name. I mean, it was a legitimate Hebrew name for a long time. It it doesn't it doesn't it's not used a lot today, but it was throughout Jewish history. I mean, there were women named Huldah. So Huldah Gate, to remind people, and some of you were just in Jerusalem not too long ago, It's the gates outside of the southern steps are called the Hulda Gates. Actually, let me just quickly show you a map of, I mean, a picture of it so that um, you can understand where the tradition was that her, look, the Hulda Gates are Herodian. They're not from her time. They're from the time that Herod, I mean, Herod rebuilt the whole temple. So, you know, but the places that we call the Hulda Gate or gates are these things. They're on the southern steps. So they're walled up. They've been walled up for a while. These are the walled, this is the gates. And these are the southern steps right here, which we oftentimes go to. It's where we had many years, many moons ago. This is what they look like today. It's where we had Aaron Nafla's bar mitzvah when we used to use the southern gate, not the, because this is an egalitarian section, so men and women can be here at the southern gates. This is actually not what it looks like today. It's a little bit bigger and it's been very well excavated around. It looks more like this. I mean, it's much clearer like that the whole way down. So yeah, we call it the Hulda Gate, and we don't know again a lot else about her, but I will tell you that I think it's I think it's significant just for the fact that again the Bible talks about her so matter of factly, so much of this attitude of we don't really have to tell you much about Hulda because we know because you all know who she is, right? She was a very important woman during that period of time. So I think when you consider that this is a this is um somebody that the king goes to, pretty important.
In
Um
Do we
yeah.
hear the name Hulda or any other,
Oh,
you
and
know,
by the way, sorry, the area of the area that she lives in, the Mishnah area, which is exactly the way Rosemary pronounced it, that Mishnah area is this part of Jerusalem, um, in that area. So um, again, this is exactly what the book of Kings. It's a repetition of what happens in Kings. But again, um, yeah, sorry, what were you going to say, Judith?
that's okay. Does Are there any cognates of the name Hulda in other um groups
Yeah,
of peoples
it's a good question.
like
Part of the
Ashteret and
no, well, here's part of the problem. Part of the problem is that uh it it become it's interesting. I'm laughing because it's difficult to know because Hilda, which is a Germanic Nordic name, also filtered its way into Yiddish. And so Hildy, you've heard of Hildy, right? You've mentioned or you've maybe met Jewish women named Hildy, right? The problem is that it's often not a variant of Hulda. It's a variant
Hilda,
of Hilda,
right?
who
But
was,
what about from the same time period or
no,
other?
it's a good question. We don't have that much. I'd be a little careful I'd be careful of that connection. Um, the rabbis don't talk a lot about Huldah, mainly because, I mean, what are you going to do with it? I mean, look, the woman's a prophet. You can't deny it, but they don't also want to make too much of it. So, just like there's not a lot of text about Deborah, um, and like, that famous scene where the rabbis riff on the fact that if there was a better Jewish male leader at the time, it wouldn't have had to go to Deborah. So that's kind of their answer when it comes to, why is there a woman in charge? Because there were no good guys at the time. There were no good, Jewish priests or Jewish prophets, sorry, in Judah. There weren't, so it's almost always like, yeah, women can do it if there's no guy that can do it. So I think that's part of the that's part of their issue with Huldah. But there's no denying it. I mean, look, she's the uh uh I mean, okay, so 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 part of the problem with like the way the Midrash and the way the rabbis treat Huldah is that like they set up a situation uh where Huldah sent him a message first saying, you know that text that you found? Let me tell you. And so he's responding to her, which itself is not what the text says. The text says that they went to Huldah. So the whole thing is almost set up where, she's a prophet. She knows what's happening, and she tells the king, you know that text you found? Let me tell you about it. So that's why they respond. I mean, the text to me in the literal, the plain sense of it, she's the best prophet around, and the king went to her because she was the best prophet around. I guess it's kind of begs the question, is she was such a good prophet, wouldn't she have known it? Which is why they can say that she sent a message to Josiah first. But to me, it's just obvious that she was, if not the most important prophet, the one that the king at least um, respects. Anyways, I mean, so her message is, again, it's going to be okay, at least for you. All right, so that's where
Did,
we're at.
did you mean the most important prophet of all the prophets, or
No,
just
no,
for
no.
this scene?
At that time, in Josiah's time, which is a really important time. I mean, this is a time when like big things are happening. The Assyrians are still in the background. The Babylonians are now asserting themselves and like taking over. The Assyrians are starting to encroach on the Assyrians. So this is a super big time in the world, and you're going to see it. I mean, like the book of Chronicles isn't talking that much about history. Kings had a little bit more, but it has this part is lifted right from Kings. This whole scene with Huldah. So yeah, she's a prophet at a really important time.
It's interesting how important she was or is or whatever, and she's a one scene pro like other prophets. She's a one
Yeah,
scene prophet.
yeah.
And very interesting.
And there are some like that. I mean, obviously not Isaiah, but there's these other prophets that they do one thing and that's it. But again, the book's not is not meant to it's not meant to do, but it would be really interesting if we had a book of the prophet Huldah, if we had her book.
Well, maybe it's not she does one thing. She does one thing that is the scribe decides is noteworthy for the book.
Yeah. And again, it's in Kings,
Scribe
right?
was
So
probably a man.
yes, but the book of Kings kept it. The book of Kings kept it, and that's why it's here. But yeah, it's here because it's important. It's important to get us to the next part. All right, let's read this.
Then the king sent word and assembled all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. The king went up to the house of God with the entire citizenry of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem and the priests and the Levites, all the people, young and old, and he read to them the entire text of the covenant scroll that was found in the house of God. The king stood in his place and solemnized the covenant before God to follow God and observe God's commandments, injunctions, and laws with all his heart and soul, to fulfill all the terms of the covenant written in this scroll. He obligated all the people of Jerusalem and Benjamin who were present, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem acted in accord with the covenant of God, God of their ancestors. Josiah removed all the abominations from the whole territory of the Israelites and obliged all who were in Israel to worship the eternal, their God. Throughout his reign, they did not deviate from following the eternal God of their ancestors.
Good king, great king. He gets everybody on the right path. Of course, as you already know, he dies when he's 39 years old. So I knew this section, which was super important, we'd spend some time on. And so now we're in the kind of weird situation where we're going to read the last two chapters of this book. One of them is really needs to be read now because we got to read what happens to Josiah. What's interesting is Josiah dies in 608. Okay. We're going to read how he dies. He dies around 608. So he's king for about 30 years, right? 31 years. There's going to be after he dies, there's going to be about another 20 years before the temple is destroyed and Judah is over. It's over. The kingship is over. So keep in mind that the last two chapters covers the last 20 years. In the book of Kings, there's a lot more here about how it unravels. And then, of course, we also have the book of Jeremiah that we read, which, even though it has a lot about what Jeremiah has to say about it as a prophet, it also has a lot of history in it too. Jeremiah, actually, for a literary prophet, has quite a lot of history, and you can see some of it unfold from the standpoint of like, okay, what does Jeremiah see? But this is the last 50 or so verses of the whole Bible are about this last 20 years where it all goes down. And it's really important, but it's not the main part of what Chronicles is all about, which we're going to summarize when we finish. Here's the last two chapters.
Josiah kept the Passover for God in Jerusalem. The Passover sacrifice was slaughtered on the 14th day of the first month. He reinstated the priests in their shifts and rallied them to the service of the house of God. He said to the Levites, consecrated to God, who taught all Israel, "Put the holy ark in the house that Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, built. As you no longer carry it on your shoulders, see now to the service of the eternal your God in Israel, God's people, and dispose yourselves by clans according to your divisions, as prescribed in the writing of King David of Israel and in the document of his son Solomon, and attend in the sanctuary by clan divisions on your kindred, the people, by clan divisions of the Levites. Having sanctified yourselves, slaughter the Passover sacrifice and prepare it for your kindred according to the word of God given by Moses." Josiah donated to the people small cattle, lambs, and goats, all for Passover sacrifices for all present, to the sum of 30,000, and large cattle, 3,000, these from the property of the king. His officers gave a freewill offering to the people, to the priests, and to the Levites. Hilkiah and Zechariah and Jehiel, the chiefs of the house of God, donated to the priest for Passover sacrifices 2,600 small cattle and 300 large cattle. Conaniah, Shemaiah, and Nethanel, his brothers, and Hashabiah and Yeiel and Jozabad, officers of the Levites, donated 5,000 small cattle and 500 large cattle to the Levites for Passover sacrifices. The service was arranged well. The priests stood at their posts, and the Levites in their divisions by the king's command. They slaughtered the Passover sacrifice, and the priest received its blood from them and dashed it, while the Levites flayed the animals. They removed the parts to be burnt, distributing them to divisions of the people by clans, and making the sacrifices to God as prescribed in the scroll of Moses. They did the same for the cattle. They roasted the Passover sacrifice in fire as prescribed, while the sacred offerings they cooked in pots, cauldrons, and pans, and conveyed them with dispatch to all the people. Afterward, they provided for themselves and the priests, for the Aaronite priests were busy offering the burnt offerings and the fatty parts until nightfall. So the Levites provided both for themselves and for the Aaronite priests. The Asaphite singers were at their stations by command of David and Asaph and Heman and Yedutun, the seer of the king, and gatekeepers were at each and every gate. They did not have to leave their tasks because their Levite brothers provided for them. The entire service of God was arranged well that day, to keep the Passover and to make the burnt offerings on the altar of God according to the command of King Josiah. All the Israelites present kept the Passover at that time and the Feast of Unleavened Bread for 7 days. Since the time of the prophet Samuel, no Passover like that one had ever been kept in Israel. None of the kings of Israel had kept a Passover like the one kept by Josiah and the priests and the Levites and all Judah and Israel there present, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. That Passover was kept in the 18th year of the reign of Josiah.
So he's 26 years old when this happens. Now, the Bible in the book of Chronicles just took 20 verses to tell us about how Passover was celebrated during King Josiah. The world is coming to an end, and we have 20 verses about how Passover was celebrated. Now, as someone who loves history, I really could have used maybe one or two lines about the Passover thing and tell me what's happening in the world. But of course, the purpose of this book and the purpose of the Bible is not to teach us history. We have to extract it from a lot of other agendas. This is a priest, and he's really, really happy that Josiah kept Passover like nobody else before. Hezekiah does a great Passover, wonderful Passover. People didn't seem to be celebrating Passover, but this Passover was even bigger. Everybody did it, and it's wonderful. It's a wonderful experience. He just told everybody it's going to be a big, big Passover. And it was. It was a big Passover. And he had lots of animals, lots of sacrifices. And as I've told you before, there are two holidays. The Bible just told us. The Israelites kept the Passover at that time, and they also kept the Feast of Unleavened Bread for 7 days. They're still referring to it 600 BCE as two different holidays. Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now they celebrate it together. It's the same time. It's spring holidays. It's Jewish holidays for the spring, but there's two of them.
But the
We blend
Passover's
them together.
the Passover's the sacrifice. The Feast
Yes.
of Unleavened Bread is the remembrance. It's two separate celebrations that make 8 days or 7 days.
Yeah, but here it's two different holidays that they are celebrating together, but you can see that they're two different holidays. These are two different holidays. They didn't say they celebrated Passover and they ate unleavened bread during that time. It says they had the Pesach and then they had Chag HaMatzot. So it's wonderful because we don't even think about it today. It's all one holiday. It wasn't a holiday. It was by his time, they're celebrating them together, and he wants everyone to do both. But there were two different ways of celebrating this spring festival. One was by doing a sacrifice, and one was by eating bread for unleavened bread for 7 days. And we put them together. And he helps do it. But at his time, they're still calling them two different holidays. It's okay. I mean, look, it's how we do lots of things. Just you actually get to see how the sausage is made. They literally right now have told us there's two different holidays. And as far as the priests are concerned, you know which one's more important. Passover, because that's sacrifices. Not that it's not important, but you know, the Hag HaMatzot is kept by it's kept at your home. It's kept, with what you eat. But this is a sacrifice. You need us. We're all and again, everyone did the sacrifice. So it's not just the priests that do it, it's the people who get to eat it too. It's the people sacrifice, but everybody gets to do it. And again, it's helping enforce and maintain Jewish tradition. So Josiah is 26 years old, young guy. He's a young guy.
After all this furbishing of the temple by Josiah, King Necho of Egypt came up to fight at Carchemish on the Euphrates, and Josiah went out against him. Necho sent messengers to him, saying, "What have I to do with you, king of Judah? I do not march against you this day, but against the kingdom that wars with me, and it is God's will that I hurry. Refrain then from interfering with God, who is with me, that you not be destroyed." But Josiah would not let him alone. Instead, he donned his armor to fight him, heedless of Necho's words from the mouth of God. And he came to fight in the plain of Megiddo. Archers shot King Josiah, and the king said to his servants, "Get me away from here, for I am badly wounded." His servants carried him out of his chariot and put him in the wagon of his second in command and conveyed him to Jerusalem. There he died and was buried in the grave of his ancestors, and all Judah and Jerusalem went into mourning over Josiah. Jeremiah composed laments for Josiah that all the singers, male and female, recited in their laments for Josiah, as is done to this day. They became customary in Israel and were incorporated into the laments. The other events of King Josiah's reign and his faithful deeds in accord with the teachings of God and his acts, early and late, are recorded in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah.
So 20 verses of the Passover and 6 verses on the Battle of Carchemish, and one of the most important moments as it plays out in Jewish history, as far as who our alliances are with. Just a very quick summary of the Battle of Carchemish. Very important battle between the Egyptians and the Babylonians. You can see which side we took. Josiah took the side of the Babylonians. Good choice. He picked the right side. The Babylonians destroyed the Egyptians. And of course, they end up destroying everybody. So if people had followed maybe Josiah's lead, we never would have been destroyed by Babylonia. We could have been a good vassal state. Maybe the temple hadn't been destroyed. That's kind of what the book of Jeremiah tells us. That's kind of what other parts of the Bible tell us. It's just that we keep getting stirred up by the Egyptians and by other people who say, hey, you guys fight with the Babylonians, we'll come to your side. Let's just get the Babylonians off of our back. They're pretty far away. Let's just, if we can just maintain as much authority as possible, we don't have to pay them taxes, just get away. Josiah seems to be a little bit more pragmatic in the sense that I'm going to fight with the Babylonians against the Egyptians because I know who's powerful. I can see the writing on the wall. Unfortunately, Josiah gets killed in battle. Maybe again, if he hadn't gone into battle, Jewish history might have been a little different. We don't know. But Josiah is a good king, a king who, like Hezekiah, is just a great example of doing the right thing. And it doesn't seem fair because he just died in battle. But again, it doesn't have to make sense. I mean, he ruled for 30 years, but he's still 39 years old when he dies, 38, 39 years old. I mean, it's not good. This is not a good ending for a really good king who the priests love and he seems to do everything right. And they're still sad about him being dead, the priests, because they compose laments for him. They're singing songs to him. We don't have those laments. We don't have the songs to Josiah, but people are singing for him. And by the way, the people that are singing for him, male and female. And they became customary to be sung. They were like songs that people were still singing 100 years later. So again, male and female singers. I want to point that out. He's a good king. Again, I'm frustrated. There's 7 verses about this. It's not right. I want more. I want to know what happened. I want to know what happened in the battle. I want to know, did the Babylonians, get involved after he died? Did they, I want to know. I want to know more. That means, folks, this is our last chapter. We're finishing now with this. This last chapter, these last 30 or so verses, covers 608 to 586. All of the stuff that goes on in the book of Kings over the last Kings is going to is going to go really quickly in this chapter. Again, if you want to go back and read it in its entirety, definitely go back to the book of Kings, Second Kings. This is essentially this is the last couple of chapters there. It's essentially condensing 3 chapters down to 1. Yeah. Or 2.5 down to 1. So let's take a look. And again, it's the last chapter of our Kings of Judah.
Rabbi, when did we start this?
When did we start? All of Beyond the Torah study was 2020. I'll tell you the first. I just looked this up.
2020. It's taken 5.5 years.
No, I think 4.5. Hold a second. Let me just tell you. The
Holy
first,
moly.
yeah, this BTS started in 20. Hold a second. I'll tell you when we started Joshua. We started Joshua. No. Why it's not coming up? I think it's the computer. Oh, 1 second.
That's not important. We can get going. I mean, I just like to know for my own.
No. There, like I said, there's 167. This will be the 168th class. So I think it was. I do want to know. It was. Let's see. It was so long ago that it was so long ago that I can't even remember. No, it's the first class was 2020. Let me just see what this was. Hold it. It was sometime in 2021, but I can't find it. I'll look for it. I apologize. I did look at it recently, and so I should know. I'm not sure if the first ones were recorded or where. I'm not 100% sure whether the first ones are recorded. They should be, but I'm not positive. Anyways, I know we were in the book of Samuel in 2022, which means Joshua and Judges would have been finished. I mean, yeah, it's about sometime in 2021. All right. So let's read, shall we? The last chapter, chapter 36.
The people of the land took Jehoahaz, son of Josiah, and made him king instead of his father in Jerusalem. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he became king, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. The king of Egypt deposed him in Jerusalem and laid a fine on the land of 100 silver talents and 1 gold talent. The king of Egypt made his brother Eliakim king over Judah and Jerusalem and changed his name to Jehoiakim. Necho took his brother Joahaz and brought him to Egypt. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. He did what was displeasing to the Eternal, his God. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon marched against him. He bound him in fetters to convey him to Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar also brought some vessels of the house of God to Babylon and set them in his palace in Babylon. The other events of Jehoiakim's reign and the abominable things he did and what was found against him are recorded in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah. His son, Jehoiakim, succeeded him as king.
Okay, so just to summarize what happened in the last 8 verses, you can see at this point the kings of Judah are literally pawns between the Egyptians and the Babylonians. I mean, there's no real explanation of it. And how do you explain it anyways? I mean, it's just basically they're just saying, I mean, I want more explanation, but at the end of the day, does it really matter? The Egyptians literally have enough power over us to get rid of the king who took over after Josiah, who's Jehoahaz, and they made his brother king instead, right? They just said, no, Jehoiakim is now the king. So the Egyptians just said, oh, we don't, that guy wants to still be friends with the Babylonians. No, we're going to put somebody who listens to us. And then King Nebuchadnezzar says, that's not acceptable. I'm getting rid of that guy. So it's like they have so little power that the Egyptians and the Babylonians are going to decide who gets to be king. It's going to be the king who's more, amenable to us. That's not a good situation, obviously. This is horrible. So Josiah's son, Jehoahaz, is king for like nothing, for a matter of months. And then Jehoiakim, the other brother, comes. Now, when the Babylonians take Jehoiakim along, they put Jehoiachin, which sounds very similar, but that wasn't initially his name, right? That was the name that the Egyptians called him. His original name was Eliakim. And the new guy, Jehoiachin, is also called Coniah. So he has another name that's a little easier to differentiate himself, I guess, from his father. But he's also not a very good king.
Jehoiachin was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned 3 months and 10 days in Jerusalem. He did what was displeasing to God. At the turn of the year, King Nebuchadnezzar sent to have him brought to Babylon with the precious vessels of the house of God, and he made his kinsman Zedekiah king over Judah and Jerusalem. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. He did what was displeasing to the Eternal his God. He did not humble himself before the prophet Jeremiah, who spoke for God.
So this is a little confusing because the Bible says here that he put his Achiv, his brother Zedekiah, Tzidkiyahu, as the king. The reason they translated his kinsman is because technically it's his uncle. Because Zedekiah is now the third son of Josiah who's made king. So Jehoiachin is the son of one of those brothers, but Zedekiah is the last of the three brothers to be king, and he will be the last king of Judah. He's the last. There are no more. This is over after this, okay? There are no more kings, and this is it. Done. So all of these three sons rule for the last 20 years. Some of them for just a matter of months. And again, they rule at the behest of the Babylonians at the end here. So Zedekiah Tzidkiyahu is only 21 when he becomes king, and we finish with him.
He did what was displeasing to the Eternal his God. He did not humble himself before the prophet Jeremiah, who spoke for God. He also rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar, who made him take an oath by God. He stiffened his neck and hardened his heart so as not to turn to the Eternal God of Israel. All the officers of the priests and the people committed many trespasses, following all the abominable practices of the nations. They polluted the house of God that had been consecrated in Jerusalem.
Yeah, and there it says flat out that it was priests that were doing bad stuff. So the priests are also committing horrible things. They're doing rituals that are that are Canaanite, that are not good. So they're not only not worshiping God, the Babylonians are doing whatever they wanted, and it's a no-win situation because Jeremiah is telling the people, and it just told us right here, Jeremiah told the people to just be humble and do what the Babylonians say, but they can't. They can't stop worshiping other gods, and they also can't stop not taking the Babylonians as their authority. So it's all bad. Religiously, it's bad. Politically, it's bad. And it's bad. It's bad all around.
The eternal God of their ancestors had sent word to them through messengers daily without fail, having taken pity on the people and on the temple. But they mocked the messengers of God and disdained those words and taunted those prophets until God's wrath against this people grew beyond remedy.
And that's Jeremiah and whatever other prophets are doing the right thing. Again, the book of Kings and the book of Jeremiah tells us there were other prophets that were encouraging Zedekiah to not be humble before the Babylonians, to turn to the Egyptians. You still have that Egyptian faction within the Jewish people that want us to do what the Egyptians want us to do. You know, like the Egyptians are promising, hey, if you stand up to the Babylonians, we'll help you. And we'll help you and we'll be on your side and it'll all be good. And we're not going to ask for anything in return. Well, you saw what the Egyptians did. The Egyptians did whatever they wanted also. So, you're going to have to be submissive to somebody. You might as well be submit maybe to the ones who were more powerful. So, and at least Jeremiah says that's what God says. Now, again, there are other prophets who are saying you got to submit to the Egyptians, but Jeremiah was right, you know, but it must have been hard, a very hard time to live.
God therefore brought the king of the Chaldeans upon them, who killed their youths by the sword in their sanctuary. Neither youth nor maiden, elder or graybeard were spared. All were delivered into his hands. All the vessels of the house of God, large and small, and the treasures of the house of God, and the treasures of the king and his officers, were all brought to Babylon. They burned the house of God and tore down the wall of Jerusalem, burned down all its mansions, and consigned all its precious objects to destruction. Those who survived the sword he exiled to Babylon, and they became his and his sons' servants till the rise of the Persian kingdom, in fulfillment of the word of God spoken by Jeremiah, until the land paid back its Sabbaths. As long as it lay desolate, it kept Sabbath, till 70 years were completed. And in the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, when the word of God spoken by Jeremiah was fulfilled, God roused the spirit of King Cyrus of Persia to issue a proclamation throughout his realm by word of mouth and in writing, as follows. Thus said King Cyrus of Persia, the eternal God of heaven has given me all the kingdoms of the earth and has charged me with building a house of God in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. May the eternal God be with those of you among this people who wish to go up.
And those, my friends, are the last words in the Bible. And we say, Tam v'neshalem tehillah el borei olam. We give thanks and praise to God, the creator of everything, which is what we say. When we finish something like this, when we finish books of the Torah, we say, Hazak, Hazak, v'nit chazak. Be strong, let all of us be strengthened. But the last words of the Hebrew Bible, my friends, are literally words that are spoken by King Cyrus. King Koresh has the last words in the Bible. That's crazy when you think about it. And now you've read it, and a lot of you have read a lot of it. The last words in the Bible are given over to a Gentile king. Now, what does that tell you about I guess the mentality that we have that there always seems to be this idea, I think, amongst Jews and probably most minority groups, that it doesn't matter unless somebody else talks about us. And I think it's kind of beautifully ironic that the Bible, the Word of God, finishes with the words of King Cyrus. And by the way, you notice I called him Koresh because that's the Hebrew name. And that's why David Koresh named himself David Koresh. He called himself David Koresh because he wanted the Jewish Messiah and the Gentile Messiah's names because he felt he was the Messiah. And so he's the Messiah for the Jews and for the Gentiles. That's why he changed his name to David Koresh. Anyways, King Koresh, King Cyrus, is given the last word. And think about it. When this was written and when it's edited, there is no more important people than the Persians. There is no bigger empire than the Persians. And if the Persian king gets the last word, it's almost, to use a modern equivalent, it's not a good modern equivalent. I know everyone's going to quibble, but if we wanted to, if we wanted to give the last word to the president of the United States in our history of up to this moment, we kind of would be saying, and look, the most powerful person in the world gave us the stamp of approval. I will also tell you that if you think that that's not of consideration to people today, you're in denial. One of the things that, for better or worse, strengthens the people of Israel today is to know that the United States, and specifically the President of the United States, has their back. That is a huge thing. And it was a huge thing for that to be said. And by the way, this is not irrelevant. I will tell you, it's highly relevant. Because when I get into discussions with my Christian clergy friends and say, especially the evangelical or more fundamentalist Christian clergy, I'll say to them, how can you defend the behavior, the personal behavior of a president who behaves so non-Christian, who has so little regard for the Bible, who has so little regard for Christianity? And they will say, look at the Bible, look at King Koresh, look at King Cyrus. God chooses imperfect vessels to do his work. So do you understand that this text that we just read may have more to say about the religious world that we live in today than any other text we can read? Because this is playing out right now at this very moment in churches across the country. That when people are trying to put into their frame of reference and into their minds a way to comprehend what's going on and not lose their sanity, their answer is God works through imperfect vessels. Nobody thought King Cyrus was a good person. King Cyrus is a Persian pagan ruler who, by all accounts, behaved like most of the Persian rulers and was not somebody that God necessarily would have wanted to work through. But when you have a person who delivers the religious agenda, what can you say other than I don't care if 3 presidents ago there was a really religious president who said he loved everything that we did, but he didn't do anything for us. He didn't overturn Roe v. Wade. Understand that this is what is happening right now. This is not the way the Book of Kings ends, folks. I just want to show you very quickly. This is not the way the Book of Kings ends because that's not the agenda of the Book of Kings. The Book of Kings is help us get through this next moment, which is our exile. And so the Book of Kings ends with the kings that are now been exiled into Babylonia. King Zedekiah, as we to refresh your memory, King Zedekiah was the last king, and when he goes against Jerusalem, they captured the king and brought him. He tries to escape. Zedekiah tries to escape Jerusalem, but they took him. They caught him. They captured the king and brought him before the king of Babylon at Riblah, and they put him on trial. They slaughtered Zedekiah's sons before his eyes, and then they put out his eyes. That's what the Babylonians did to Zedekiah. The last thing you're going to see is your children being murdered. And then they brought him to Babylonia. But they continued to provide for, they provided for his brother. Jehoiachin is still in Babylon, but they take good care of him. And that's the best you can say that happens to the book. There's a little bit of hope. But that's not the way the book of Chronicles ends. That's not the way the Bible ends. The Bible ends with us being restored back to our homeland, which of course means, what do? You make sure that you do the right thing and that you don't ever get exiled again. Don't get on the wrong side of God, and make sure that this little time that we live in, we treasure it as much as possible. So let me just try to get this here for you to see. What I did here, and I'll share this out right now. I'll send it out to everybody. This is a chart that I used my ChatGPT friend to do, which was to create a comparison between what we read in Samuel and Kings and what we just read in Chronicles, which is, again, to cut to the punchline, Judah is exiled. Here, we've returned. But what is the focus of the book of Chronicles versus Kings? This hope, which is, if you're humble and you pray, I will heal their land. Right? So again, we talked about it a lot. Elijah and Elisha aren't even mentioned. The focus is on Judah in the book of Chronicles. I mean, by the time the book of Chronicles was edited together, the North had been exiled for 200 years. And why do you need to talk about the book of Kings is talking about the North to some extent as a warning, like, if we do this in Judah, we're going to wind up like them. Here, what do we need is Israel as an example for? We were exiled. We have Judah. We have our own people. We don't need to look at the northern kingdom. Look at what happened to Judah. Don't let that happen. So again, we don't focus much on the north in the book of Chronicles because it's not necessary. I mean, again, the book says if you want to read the books, they're there. Thankfully, those books are there. Other books that they mention are not there. But we do have this much rosier picture painted of the good kings, whether it's David or Hezekiah. We talked about, I shared the Hezekiah text, the Hezekiah chart. These books of the Bible are Chronicles is definitely has an obvious agenda to it. I'm going to put both of these in our chat right now so that you can download them. And Rosemary, are you coming down anytime soon to
I actually planning to attend the Women of Reformed Judaism Pacific Conference. That's in March
and where's that at?
in Pasadena.
In March, like what weekend or what?
It's the weekend of the 14th
of March. Well, folks, I definitely want to have something in person to celebrate our finishing of the text. And we are going to, I really would love for Rosemary to be there. I don't think we can do this in person without having Rosemary there.
Oh,
And really want to thank
I'm
you,
gonna have to make
Rosemary.
another trip then.
No, no. I mean, I don't know. We'll figure it out. So you
Yeah.
and I will talk offline, and we'll
All
let
right.
people know. But I want to thank everybody for being on this journey, a multi-year journey. And I will tell you that the journey's not ending because we're Tuesday morning is going back to the beginning. It's going back to Genesis next week. So we're going to be reading Genesis at a very slow pace. We're going to be reading it with literally not even necessarily like we're going to read the first day, we're going to go through just the days of creation. So it's a very slow read through Genesis in the sense that we really get to see the text, understand it from the standpoint of maybe some of the not just rabbinic sources that we studied, but also some of I'll share with you some of the wonderful insights from some of the commentaries that have recently been done in Genesis, and even some that were not done that recently, but I think are some really interesting ones. Isaac Asimov wrote an amazing uh, commentary on Genesis. It only has the first few chapters of like the first 13 chapters or so, but it's a wonderful. He has some great insights in Genesis. Had an amazing mind and brought it to that. So we're going to do that and have a chance to kind of go back to the beginning to see where it all started for us. But again, it's amazing to come to this point in completing the book of Chronicles and doing it over, like I said, over 4.5 years, whatever. I'll get the exact date in it, and when we invite everybody to the Siyum. We call it Siyum. Yes, and Floyd, there will be drinks at this Siyum. We'll have food and drink at it because we are supposed to do that. And Gail, are you here anytime soon? Southern California?
No, I just made it to Oregon. I haven't even unpacked yet.
Well, well, maybe we'll find a time if you make it down too. We'd love to have you in person with us. Yeah, because technically speaking, yeah, we've gone past California in having Gale in Oregon. So Judith wants to call Genesis, it's an allegory, Judith. Was Judith in the allegory? Is it an allegory of Judith?
Don't you remember? My father always said that. It's an allegory, Judith.
Oh yeah, but is it called
That's, so
Genesis?
that's
Oh
the
yeah. So it's called
Genesis.
it's an allegory. Yes, it's an
It's an
allegory. It's
allegory,
called
Judith.
Judith. Okay, yeah, yeah, that's somebody who was an Orthodox Jew trying to make sense of what's going on in Genesis, which defies, as I've already been looking at it. And again, by the way, that's why I went down the road of human sacrifice because I was listening to a great discussion about the Akedah, which is several weeks, would be several months actually, Ed. But I'm thinking about some of the things that we're going to read in Genesis that uh yeah, they're deeply psychological and deeply personal. So, and because they're about us, they're about families, they're about the individual, they're about the struggle, the internal struggle that goes on in a person. Um, and so, yeah, it's an allegory, Judith, but it's also it's also a mind. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot going. I don't know what I tell my. I don't know what I tell my daughters. I don't know if I tell them it's an allegory. I don't need to tell them that, but I would tell them it is. It is a. You go down a. You go down a exploration of your mind and your soul. That I think when you really study Genesis, which we do, we try to do it every so often. Uh, but it's an amazing work. So we'll be doing that. And I have no idea how long that's going to be, but it's going to be probably pretty close to a year of studying Genesis. That I'll tell you. Maybe if not a year, then at least 10 months, because those chapters of Genesis are very rich for for and hopefully again we'll be having more discussion about it too. Less necessarily reading, but more internal discussion, folks.
Oh, so we're not, this isn't going to be a speed read.
No, it's a not only not a speed read, but it's also again hopefully much more of a discussion. I don't expect people to be well schooled in the history of in Israelite history. That was what I was interested in. I don't expect yeah, I don't expect many people to be interested. By the way, that's why I didn't become a biblical professor because I knew it would be a limited audience. But I do, but that's not Genesis. Genesis is so little history, but a whole lot of meta myth and it's allegory, Judith. Yeah. So thank you everybody for being on this journey and uh yeah, let it sink in. The words of King Cyrus. Gosh, I'm telling you, we couldn't have finished this at a better moment for me to walk out of this and go, you know what? Things haven't changed a whole lot. Things haven't changed. And you know what? On the good side of it all, you know what? We're going to get through any challenges we have as Jewish people, as people in America, people in whatever you're feeling of hopelessness today or whatever despondency or whatever anger you have. I will tell you, this is not what these people were dealing with at the end of Zedekiah's reign or during the time of Cyrus. We live in a much different time, and it's if they can get through this stuff, the stuff they got through, we're going to get through our stuff. So, but some things don't change. We're always looking for approval, and we're always looking for the big guy to pat us on the back and say, "You guys are doing right. We're going to support you. We're going to be on your side." Yep. All right, folks. Take care. And again, thank you everybody for being here and have a wonderful rest of the day. Tomorrow, Kabbalah at 7 p.m. And I promise I will post all of the classes are already up on YouTube, but I'm going to post the ancillary material will be up there today. Take care, everybody, and greetings from San Diego, from San Jose, from Oregon, from wherever
Yes.
you are. Have a great day. Or Oxnard, the Nard. Bye, bye, everybody.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank
Bye,
you.
bye, everybody. Thank you.